Great, welcome back. So, I've got all 32 teams on the board, and I want to do a quick overview and try to make this as quick as I can of each team and whether or not I feel like they will win a Stanley Cup as they're currently constituted or over, say, the next 3 to 5 years. Because it's kind of fun to look at this. And again, because we're coming out of a trade deadline where everybody's busy to declare who won, who lost, who's good, who's bad, and this was stupid and this was great. Then a couple years down the road, you'll look back on those things and go, that was a bad take. And that's where bad takes can happen. So while I may be running the risk of that here, and certainly I've had those over the years myself, it's still fun. It's fun to do it. So I just want, again, each GM's on the board for all 32 teams. We got to get used to there being a 32nd team, which is Seattle, which should be right between San Jose and St. Louis in all of the yearbooks and publications alphabetically. And so we'll start off with the Ducks, who are still in a rebuild. Bob Murray, their general manager, and I think he's done well. I think the Ducks are progressing through that rebuild. The real question becomes, how's it going to look on the other side, right? We don't know yet, but so far, so good. Arizona, who were once the Phoenix Coyotes, as it says on that magnet there. Bill Armstrong, it's still his first year. I feel bad for first-year GMs right now because there are so many people online and in the media too, which seem to be really quick to jump on them. It's too early to say, Armstrong's deal. But I will say this, Arizona stayed in a playoff hunt when, before the season started, with all the other problems that were going on with this organization. And even during the season, some of the stuff's been going on. It would be understandable if players were distracted and had... No, it's not been a problem. Don Sweeney in Boston. Sweeney takes a lot of heat, and I understand it. But I think it's overblown as well. I think what he did with Taylor Hall immediately made some people love him. There are others kind of shaking their heads and going, I hope this works out. I do worry that Boston right now is doing what Detroit used to do, trying to get that one last Stanley Cup ring. And of course, for Boston, that Stanley Cup ring was in 2011. And a lot of the players that they're looking to get that second ring for, they're getting older. And at some point, the Bruins are going to go into a rebuild. And I don't know that Sweeney necessarily is the GM when that happens. But I do worry about giving up too many future assets now for a team that I don't think is a Stanley Cup contender. I don't think this core wins another cup. I want to be wrong, but I don't think they do. Buffalo, Kevin Adams. This is another rookie GM who's taken a lot of flack. But it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you trade Taylor Hall for the best offer you have on the table, people are mad that wasn't enough. If you hold on to him through the deadline and you lose him for nothing in the offseason, everybody's screaming and yelling for your head. So it's about finding some sort of a balance and some sort of reasonable expectation, and I think sometimes we as fans may fall short in that. No, I used to. I know I used to get really mad, and I'll talk about that as we go through the list. But Buffalo, I think it should be fine eventually. At some point. I hope so, because it's been a while. Calgary, Brad Treliving. I think the Flames have trended in the wrong direction, and I think it's interesting that they picked up players from the Canucks, and there was an expectation that the Flames were going to be a lot better this year, and they really haven't been. Markstrom was supposed to be the answer in net, and while he's been good, he hasn't been as good as he was in Vancouver, which I think we should have expected. Maybe we should have expected that. And it's weird because that kind of makes Benning look better for not giving that exact same offer to Markstrom. But there's tunnel vision when it comes to general managers. If you are of the mind that a certain GM should be fired, like Treliving or Bowman or Benning or Blake or whoever, your mind's not going to be changed by something good that happens. And vice versa. For people who are staunch defenders of a GM, when something bad happens, they'll usually shrug it off and go, well, how did we know? So how did we know Markstrom wouldn't be, putting up great totals in Calgary? We had no way of knowing. Don Waddell. I will say this, though, when people say, well, his defense in Calgary isn't as good as it was in Vancouver, I do have a small chuckle about that. Because there were videos last year of reviews where I was saying this defense in Vancouver sucks, and if it wasn't for Markstrom, we would have got killed. Carolina, Don Waddell, when he was hired, I was one of many who were like, Waddell, that's an interesting hire. It's been brilliant. I do think of the teams I'm talking about, that's the first one that I can say, yeah, they probably win a Stanley Cup. Yep. With the way Don Waddell's running the team, I would be surprised if they don't. Chicago, Stan Bowman, another GM that takes a lot of heat when things aren't going well. Maybe doesn't get as much credit as he should when things are going well. They've stayed in the playoff hunt without Jonathan Toews. They stayed in the playoff hunt when Kirby Dach was out as well. Two of their best players. So it's hard for me to criticize him or them. And if you told me, well, Chicago's going to get a fourth cup ring at some point for Patrick Kane, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Joe Sakic in Colorado, they'll win a Stanley Cup. I don't know that it's necessarily this year. My prediction is this year. There are a lot of people predicting this year, which makes me nervous. As very often when it's a consensus, then that winner doesn't get it. However, last year there was a consensus on Tampa, and that worked out. So yeah, Sakic has done a great job, one of the best GMs in the league, and I don't think there's a lot of debate about that anymore. Columbus, Jarmo Kekalainen. I'm on the fence with Kekalainen. I think there's been some good fortune in there, combined with some good pro scouting, some good drafting, some good moves made at deadlines. They went all in a couple years back. It had mixed results long term, and now they're kind of in this rebuild retool situation. And of course, there's the whole question of Tortorella. And at the end of this year, I would expect he leaves. But then, who do you replace him with? Do you bring in Gerard Gallant? Because that name comes up all the time, right? Or what do you do? I don't know that Columbus is going to have an easy build back up. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to Patrick Laine, how that works out. Do they end up trading him? What happens there, right? So Columbus, we'll see what happens. Dallas, Jim Nill. I've been critical of Jim Nill at times. I will say that, it's kind of a mixed bag. So they go to the Stanley Cup final, and a lot of his moves look smart when that was going on. This year, it's kind of fallen off for Dallas, of course. They have a lot of overtime loss and shootout loss points. They're 2-11 after 60 minutes. And I don't expect him to fix this in season. I would think this off season, though, we'll see what he does. I don't know how long Nill's going to remain as the general manager of Dallas. I don't know what the expectation is of ownership for the Stars, but they seem to kind of be meandering. So I don't know that they win a Stanley Cup anytime soon. Detroit, Steve Yzerman. Everybody knows I love Steve Yzerman's work. I've always been a big fan of Steve Yzerman's as a general manager. It just works. Him in Detroit is, of course, the perfect fit. And I think he's made some amazing draft picks. Sider is one that could turn out to be brilliant. He should be playing next season. We may very well see Raymond next season as well. This is a team that could take off. You look at how well they're playing this year, pretty good. And Jeff Blashill is doing a good job of getting the most out of this team for a full 60 minutes every game, which says a lot when a team is that far out of the playoffs that the guys still come out and they're ready to play. Edmonton, Ken Holland. This is one, again, where I'm kind of on the fence with Holland. I think that he spent probably a little bit too much at the deadline last year, so this deadline he was quieter. I think he made a couple of smart moves here during the season. I think Edmonton is in a position where they're a contender. He deserves some credit for that. There's still a lot of players here who were left over from the previous management, and so I think there's some credit to be handed out there as well, as much as people may not want to hand that to the previous general manager. But yeah, I mean, the Oilers are in decent shape. If you're going to, give a Stanley Cup to a Canadian team in short order, Toronto and Edmonton are probably the most popular picks to win that cup. And I think Holland will deserve a lot of credit if/when that happens. Florida, Bill Zito. Zito's done a very good job. Zito, immediately when he stepped in, he seemed to have an idea of what needed to be fixed, and he's done a good job. It is his first year. I don't think there's a lot of pressure for Florida to win a cup this year. I think winning a round is a start. This is a team that hasn't won a round since 1996. So if they get out of the first round this year, I think that'll generate a lot of interest, and maybe they'll start selling more tickets. Again, we talk a lot about Florida doesn't sell tickets. They haven't won a round since 1996. So I can kind of understand, and they've been directionless for a lot of that. So right now they have a direction. They're doing very well. Picking up Carter Verhaeghe, he looks brilliant. Rob Blake in LA, I like what he's doing. I can see what's going on in LA. I like what he's doing, and I think he's made some very smart moves. And so, yeah, I think the Kings are going to be exciting to watch as soon as next year. They've shown signs at points over last season and this year that they're ready to start winning. They always seem to fall back. I think that there's a good vision, though, for this team, and I think Rob Blake will get them back there. They'll be contenders sooner rather than later, I think. Minnesota, Bill Guerin. Guerin came in and made some odd moves. His moves at center and goaltending, where he said things needed to get better, left us scratching our heads, and still the center spot is kind of a sore point in this organization. But you can't argue with results. The team's been a lot of fun to watch. He's definitely benefited from Kaprizov coming over. but he got Kaprizov to come over. And Minnesota right now looks like, playoff team, and things should be fun for them. So it's been a long time since Minnesota was a fun team to watch, and their fans had fun watching them in any kind of playoff setting where you didn't go, well, we're going to lose in the first round, right? So hopefully that narrative is changing now. Montreal, Mark Bergevin, what day of the week is it? You want a general manager in an organization that can be praised on Monday, damned on Tuesday, and praised on Wednesday? It's Montreal. I am fascinated by how quickly Bergevin will make a signing and people are like, this is brilliant. Look at the Toffoli signing, right? This is brilliant. This is great. What a great signing. Canucks are morons for not holding on to him. Montreal gets off to a great start. This is fantastic. Awesome. Then Montreal starts to dive a bit and people are like, Bergevin needs to go. These moves didn't work. This is terrible. This is... So then they win a couple games and it's, woohoo, Bergevin. It's kind of funny to watch. And I know they're not the only fan base that does this, but it feels like with Montreal, it's really, really strong. And the expectation is championships. They haven't had one since 93. I don't know that I see this team getting a franchise or an NHL record Stanley Cup anytime soon beyond what they already have. But at least it's fun to watch the reactions online, win or lose, from Montreal fans. Nashville, David Poile. I think Nashville's best chances to win Stanley Cups, I think, passed a couple of years back. I think 2017 and 2018 were the best opportunities for this organization. That being said, it's been fun to watch them and the run they've been on recently. I think that there are some good young pieces on this team. Saros looks like he's ready to be the starting goaltender and could be very competent. So while I don't see them as necessarily a contender, I don't see them falling right out either. And that's despite the reality that Johansson and Duchesne have not lived up to their contracts. So if they somehow found a way to get that cap hit off the books, and that's where with David Poile, he deserves the blame on that, right? When the bad contracts are there, you have to kind of push that back on the GM. But you can do that and still credit the GM for other good moves they make. You don't have to be 100% against or 100% pro a GM. And I find life is a lot easier when you're that way because you sound less crazy. Because then it's, well, what about the good moves you made? I don't care about that. Well, then, okay, fine. New Jersey, Tom Fitzgerald, still young by GM standards in his career, right? So he's still going through the process. But I think New Jersey's done a very good job of staying competitive with the young kids that are coming in. And I think New Jersey's on the right track. I think contention is still a couple of years away, but they're on the right track, and you can see this. And there seems to be a game plan here if you're New Jersey. So I credit Fitzgerald with that. I think he's earned at least 2 years to put this team together and see if they're going in the right direction before there's any even discussion about his job. I think a minimum of 2 years. And I think that's true with GMs. Unlike coaches, you can fire them willy-nilly. But I think with GMs, you need to give them a minimum of, 3 years to really sort of, tear out what was there, bring in their own pieces and try to put it together. And then you can look at where the team's at and go, okay, are we getting better or are we not? Lou Lamoriello with the Islanders, he made things better as soon as he got there. And there's a lot of detractors with Lou Lamoriello. I don't get that. But again, I guess I kind of understand. It's like people got upset when Kyle Palmieri got traded there and he had to shave because there's no facial hair allowed on Lou Lamoriello teams, which is weird. Sure, it's weird and it's a George Steinbrenner type thing, but I don't think it's necessarily a big deal. I think, if somebody tells you to shave, I think there's worse things that you could be told to do by a general manager. And yeah, I think Lou Lamoriello's done a good job. I think that bringing in Barry Trotz was a very, very wise move. And I think the Islanders should win a Stanley Cup over the next few years and that very long drought they've had. I don't want to predict which year, because again, that's where people get tied down, and that's why I did that video about a year ago now on the next 25 Stanley Cup winners, because you can't project that out too far. But I do think that for the Islanders, they're on the right track, and I would not be surprised if Lamoriello ends up, being the GM when they win their next Stanley Cup. Jeff Gorton. Gorton, much like Bergevin, can be praised one day and then, sunk into the ground the next. I think the New York Rangers have some excellent young players. I think Lafreniere is going to be fantastic. People need to stop expecting these 18, 19-year-olds to come in and just take over the league, because it feels like it's harder now to do that than it used to be. And the Rangers have a good young core. They have good young goaltenders. I don't know about cups necessarily, but at least all the building blocks are there, and it's just a matter of it all coming together. Zibanejad has recovered from a very slow start, which, reports have it that it's COVID related, that he had a bad bout of it, and it took him a long time for him to get his wind back and get his energy back. So, the Rangers next season should be pretty formidable. Ottawa, Pierre Dorion. As the Senators start to get better, the real question is going to be a matter of, and I've talked about this before, you got to have the right veterans to bring those young stars out and really, build. The whole Patrick Marleau idea of having that veteran that comes in and helps to shepherd along the young stars, and that's why Marleau was brought to the Leafs. And I'm interested to see who Ottawa's going to bring in. I would think this summer might be a good time for them to dip into the free agent market and look for an older player who has leadership skill, leadership ability. Maybe bring back a Nick Foligno. That would be an option. If Nick Foligno doesn't go back to Columbus, maybe look at bringing him back to Ottawa. You can, at least an alternate captain, if not the captain. Alternate captain's just fine for him, and he could be a really good guy to bring that together. And then, build Ottawa up. I think there's still questions in goal. I think there's still questions on the blue line. And then, of course, how this all turns out will decide how secure Dorion is in his job. Because Melnick's going to be putting the pressure on him not too long from now. Chuck Fletcher in Philadelphia, he's done a pretty good job. I think the Flyers, and I know this season they've taken a step back. That's what the Flyers do every other year. And then every other year they're right back in the playoffs. I still think the Philadelphia Flyers will be a Stanley Cup champion over the next few years. I think it'll happen. I think it'll all click together. I think there's enough pieces there to make it work. And I know they're probably not making the playoffs this year, but I don't overreact to 1 year anymore. Once you get into your late 40s, 1 year. What's 1 year? And it becomes a very small unit of time as you get older. So I'm not going to overreact to 1 year. I still think Philadelphia, the drought they've had, it'll come to an end. It's just a matter of finding that right combination. I don't think they're that far off. I think there's a couple of improvements they need to make to the blue line. They do need an improvement in net. You keep Carter Hart, but you find the right partner for him in net. I know Elliott's done his best, but they really need somebody else. And I think when either Korpisalo or Merzlikins become available out of Columbus, Philadelphia would be foolish not to call and see what the price would be there. Pittsburgh, Ron Hextall. He's just got there. I like Hextall as a GM. I understand why Philadelphia fired him when they did, but I like him as a GM. I think he's got a good eye, and I think for Pittsburgh, they're probably going to win another Stanley Cup because Sidney Crosby and Pittsburgh, and I've seen them win 5, so they'll probably win another cup. I'll act surprised when it happens, though. San Jose and Doug Wilson. Here's one that really, sort of tears both ways, right? San Jose is always in the mix. They've got a pretty good record under Wilson. Wilson's record with contracts, it's debatable. And San Jose's position as a potential playoff contender, well, which week is it? So right now it looks bad, but 2 weeks from now it could look great. So I don't know where to go with San Jose. I don't think Stanley Cups are in their near future. I don't see it, but again, there are occasions where a team might win a Stanley Cup out of nowhere. Speaking of out of nowhere, Seattle. So Ron Francis, everything out of Seattle right now, they're doing it right. They seem to be doing it right when it comes to their pro scouts, their amateur scouts, the names of the people hired, just the way this organization's slowly being put together, I think is smart. They've been doing mock expansion drafts for the last year, and they're getting a really good feel for who they want to pick out of who's going to be available, and they're already working the phones. Well, people are calling them, I think, more than they're calling out. And so I think they have a really good idea right now of what the team may look like in October. And I think they're likely working it the same way Vegas did, where they had their first, second, third, and fourth line planned, and their top 6 defensemen and both goaltenders. Vegas went into that expansion draft knowing exactly who they wanted in which position. And Seattle will probably emulate that because it worked out pretty well for Vegas. St. Louis, Doug Armstrong. St. Louis definitely looks like a one and done right now, but they got hot in 2019. They still have a lot of the pieces they had in 2019. There are some question marks here. The ability to stay healthy is a huge one for St. Louis, but I would not rule out another Stanley Cup, because once a team has won that first cup, I think you then understand what it takes to win another one. It's hard to win them back-to-back, but I think you understand what it takes to win another one. And I'm not going to say it becomes easier, but you're familiar with it. So I'm not ruling out another Stanley Cup run for St. Louis in the near future. Tampa Bay, Julien Brisebois. Brisebois has proven to be a pretty adept GM. He learned from Yzerman very well. Maybe his role under Yzerman was underrated, but last year he trades out a couple of first-round picks, and he gets Gaudreau, he gets Coleman. This year, he moves a first-round pick, brings in Savard. He's making some very, very smart decisions. And this is even while Carter Verhaeghe goes off to Florida, becomes a star. Volkov had a couple of goals last night for Anaheim. So even though, and JT Miller goes to Vancouver and becomes, a really good top six forward for Vancouver. So they're spreading out this talent all around the league without losing anything off their own roster, without suffering the consequences, without, their fans looking, going, oh, man, we sucked this year. If we had Verhaeghe, that GM, he's so dumb. Whereas if Verhaeghe came from almost any other organization and performed the way he has for Florida, the GM would be raked over the coals. If anybody from Vancouver or Toronto, I'd say Chicago, if any of their players went to another team and just became a star and they got nothing back for it, yeah, that would get ugly. But in Tampa, that's fine. No big deal, because they're still really good and they're still very likely to be in the mix. I do think Tampa Bay wins another Stanley Cup. I don't know about this year, but I do think they win at least one more Stanley Cup. When you got Hedman, Vasilevsky, Stamkos, Kucherov, it's an embarrassment of riches. Toronto, Kyle Dubas. Toronto's probably Canada's best overall chance at a Stanley Cup outside of Edmonton. So for Toronto, and again with the Leafs, the issue, too, I have with the Leafs is that everything kind of does get overly magnified because it's Toronto. But I think people are overly critical at times and probably not critical enough at others. Kyle Dubas, he makes good trades. He's good at the draft table. Does he spend more money on keeping players than he should? In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. I think it balances out for the most part. I think what he's benefiting from right now is that this team has a winning pedigree, and it makes it easier to bring guys in on cheap contracts because they want to go somewhere where they're going to get a chance to win. So you're definitely able to bring in guys to fill out your roster that you might not otherwise be able to get if your team wasn't seen as a contender. So, yeah, Toronto, I think, is in good shape, and if a team in Canada were to win a Stanley Cup, Toronto would probably be my pick as the one. And that's even though I know the Freddie Anderson debate and all that. Not getting into that right now. But I think that gets overblown too. And we'll see if Toronto can go on a run. Vancouver. Jim Benning. And I know there's people who want to fire Benning. Here's the thing. I remember Harry Neal. I remember Dave Nonis. I remember Pat Quinn. I remember Brian Burke. I remember Mike Gillis. And every Canucks GM has had this, we need to fire this guy movement locally, from fans, from media, all of them. Pat Quinn, it was heavy up until he's actually gone. And then Burke, when he was gone, it was sort of like, good, and then Nonis, good, he's gone. And then Gillis, good, he's gone. And now it's Benning, good, he's gone. My opinion's always been, who do we replace him with? And there's a lot of ideas on who could replace him. And then there's the other side of me that never believes in my lifetime the Canucks will win the Stanley Cup, which has really kind of taken all of the passion out of the trade deadline for me. I used to be one that I would rage. The last time I got upset at the trade deadline, it was when the Canucks traded Cody Hodgson. I was convinced Cody Hodgson was going to go to Buffalo and he was going to be awesome. And he had one good year, and then it just didn't happen. So since then, it's changed. I was upset when McCann left, but honestly, I just, at this point, I've kind of gone numb to it, so I don't really react. Like when Godak got traded yesterday, I kind of went, all right, cool. Guess we'll see what Highmore can do, because it's just no point in getting that upset and again, pulling out all the charts and how all this is wrong and all that's wrong, and all right. I maybe I'm just too old for it. I just don't find any reason to get that upset and that worked up over things. Does Benning get fired? No. Nope. He at least has the job through next season. And if he doesn't, then that's where I would start asking questions of Francesco Aquilini. Because if you're going to move him, if you're going to move on from him, then don't let him sign contracts for next year. It's the Peter Chiarelli problem with Edmonton. Before Chiarelli's fired, right before then, they signed Koskinen for too much money. And so don't do that. Don't let a guy sign contracts unless you're sure he's coming back. So as soon as they signed the Pearson contract, I kind of went, well, so Jim's sticking around next season. He's not going anywhere. So the whole Fire Benning thing, it's entertaining, but I don't think it goes anywhere. And I would fully expect whoever would take the job from him would get all of the exact same criticisms. Vegas, Kelly McCrimmon. Now, some will say George McPhee's still technically the GM. He just got bumped up so they wouldn't lose McCrimmon to another franchise. There's some truth to that, but I'll give McCrimmon credit as well for being a part of a Vegas brain trust that's done a very good job. It would be surprising if Vegas doesn't win a Stanley Cup with the team they've put together. It would be interesting to see what would happen if they didn't. What happens if they don't end up winning a Stanley Cup and they end up having to do some kind of a retool or rebuild? How will that affect how fans see the team, how the media covers this team, and what then? So for Vegas, they kind of need to win a Stanley Cup. And it's important that with this core and what they've put together that they actually do follow through and win a Stanley Cup. And ownership expects a Stanley Cup. So that makes a difference too when ownership saying, so I expect a Stanley Cup rather than we hope for one. The expectation is they'll get it. And I don't know how much patience we'll see from ownership in Vegas should they fail for the next couple of years and should they start to fall down the standings, right? Brian Mcclellan in Washington. There was a lot of discussion yesterday about Mcclellan and the deal with Panik. And the reality is that he was, according to Elliot Friedman, this is the price now for getting cap space. You have to give up a first-round draft pick in order to get cap space. And that started with Patrick Marleau going to Carolina last year, which was, all right, if you want cap space, okay, but it's going to cost you a first-round draft pick. So, or a couple years ago, I guess, with Marleau. I don't know, time all just sort of bleeds together now. But yeah, it's expensive, but I understand teams saying, oh, if we're going to help you out of your cap problem, you're giving us a major draft pick. And in this year's draft, 2021, where it's seen as kind of a crapshoot, so if you're upset that a team traded down from one round to the next, Vancouver, it doesn't. This year it matters a lot less than normal because there's so much less scouting that's able to be done. Teams are going to have completely different ideas over who should be drafted where. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens. So I think Brian McClellan's done a good job. I understand people being upset over losing, all these picks, but he's trying to get cap space and cap flexibility. They're a team that's looking ahead to the expansion draft too and trying to make sure they're properly positioned for that. There's a lot of that going on right now. I think McClellan's done a good job. Would I be surprised if Ovechkin wins another cup? No. I would not be surprised if Ovechkin wins another cup. Winnipeg, Kevin Cheveldayoff. I've gone back and forth on Cheveldayoff. There was a point where I thought he wasn't doing enough, where I thought there weren't enough trades being made, that this was just a team that was allowed to be just mediocre and just keep it that way. But in not making the trades that I thought at the time he should, it's worked out pretty well. Winnipeg is one of the top 3 teams in the North. When they go back to their traditional divisions next year, they should still be a playoff team. This is a good team. A lot of guys are still in their prime, and they're kind of a dark horse to win a Stanley Cup. Again, if a team in Canada can do it, and there are some who think that'll probably never happen again. There are some who think, oh, it should happen soon. I am of the mind that I want it to happen, so it's no longer a conversation starter. That we just say, yeah, so we got a Stanley Cup in Canada. Good, done. All right, fine, cool, finished. So yeah, Cheveldayoff and the Jets, I think, have done a good job, and I think they're in pretty good shape. So there's my honest appraisal of all 31 teams, their general managers, and my view on their outlook and which ones should win Stanley Cups relatively soon. But again, things change quickly from year to year. You can change from month to month, sometimes week to week. So there's my question for you guys. Of the teams in the league, which franchises do you think are run the best? Which ones do you think are run the worst? And which GM do you think on this board is the best of the GMs? And why is it Joe Sakic? Why is it Steve Yzerman? Why is it those two guys who very often were 2 of the best players in the National Hockey League as well? So this is an example of 2 guys who were excellent players Also, pretty smart general managers. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.